present from the 7th.
Yeah.
This is the best birthday I've ever had.
So, to begin with, I want to say, I'm here because I only show up for movies I love. It really is, for me, your movie embodies all the possibilities of what I think a medium could be, in the sense that it's intensely personal, intensely artistic, it's a biography, it hurts. I think that you should not make movies that don't hurt. You don't make a movie that hurt you and others, because then you can heal. And it's a profoundly moving thing to see. To me, we should stop saying it's my favorite animated or not animated. It's one of my favorite films of the year. That's a big distinction. And I wanna start by saying, because a lot of people that approach the medium with caution, either because they believe it's for kids or because they believe it should be used for kids, would say, why animation? And the answer to me is very simple, but I wanted to ask you about it.
Well, firstly, I always say that if you're not an emotional wreck by the end of one of my films, then I have failed. But, you said it beautifully a few years ago at the Oscars when you reminded everyone that animation's not a genre, that it's a medium. And for the last 28 years, through every film I've made, I've been trying to communicate this to audiences. In some countries it's easier than others. Countries like the Czech Republic and Estonia, where there's a long history of adult animation, and animation that's not afraid to deal with challenging subject matter, and not afraid of the dark. And I use the word dark a lot, because one of my favourite quotes is, without the dark, the light has no meaning. So you do need to take audiences to dark places so that when the moments of levity come along, they're connected more. I think comedy too works better after tragedy. So I think laughter is a release of tension in many cases, and that if you show a very dark sequence and then follow it with something lighter, the audience are almost relieved that this light moment has come along. And that's what I'm trying to do with all my films, is get that balance between the comedy, the tragedy, and the light and the dark. And really all I'm trying to do is reflect our lives. Darkness is a part of living, and we have highs and lows, and that's why I use the roller coaster.
Yeah.
Because it's a metaphor for the highs and lows.
But it is, let me start with a hot take, as the kids say. I think your movies are absolutely life-affirming, beautiful, and full of humor. And they are that way because they understand the frailty, the imperfection, and the absurdity of being alive. And I think if you follow the progression of that from your short to this film, basically you come to the conclusion that living is a compromise that is better than the alternative. Period.
Yeah.
And I think, is this a journey you have taken as a human being from the short to now? This absurdity and beauty of the everyday madness.
Yeah, I try and get as much poetry into the films as much as I try and get as much philosophy. My films are very layered, obviously, they're very dense. My father, who was a vaudevillian, he was an acrobatic clown. And when I came out of film school, I told him I'm an auteur. He said, what's that mean? He said, it's French.
Look at him.
Yeah. And in Australia, we're very self-deprecating, and we he said, oh, you're a wanker, But he said, you know what, you're just like I was when I was an acrobat.
I think your father was my father.
Well, my father was a clown, and he, like most clowns, he was a tragic clown. So he said to me, forget this auteur stuff. All you got to do is make them laugh, make them cry. And that really stuck in my head, and that's what I've really tried to do in a very simplistic way with each film, is have moments of laughter and moments of sadness and melancholy. I love that quote, Victor Hugo, melancholy is the happiness of being sad. And I never see my films as depressing or you said uplifting and life affirming. That's what I'm trying to do. And I get really upset, particularly young people who say, "Oh, your films are too depressing." I said, "Really? I really didn't. I tried to make them full of hope." And this film has a happy ending. I could have quite easily left Gilbert dead and not. That would be depressing, but it's getting that balance, because life is both. And you go right back to the Greeks, comedy, tragedy. It's just that's how it is. And I think for too long, animation's been a little bit flat and formulaic, and then, as we were discussing over dinner, there's a long history of adult animation that's come from countries like Estonia and the Czech Republic and France, and I think Japan especially too, and things are changing, which is good.
You say the Greeks, and I think that one of the things animation does, and it's beautiful, is it can tonally, like if you made this movie live action, tonally the shifts and the sort of outsized oddity of it would necessitate a mannered style. And what in animation, I think you said the Greeks, and it's, you're animating the masks of classic Greek theater, and you're able to transit through all those tones much easier than you would in it could not be a live action film. It could not.
No, and that's the beauty of animation is we have. I mean, I get asked all the time, Adam, when are you moving into live action films? And I always reply with, well, no one ever goes up to a live action director and say, when are you moving into plasticine? It's sort of the beauty of animation is we have we get to have creative control, we have creative freedom, we get to play God. Our characters can look however we want them to look, and we have that wonderful tool of exaggeration where we can heighten an emotion, we can heighten a moment that's poignant or funny, and I think if I had a real actor, I'd want to go up and stretch their faces and make it more expressive. So I think animation's a wonderful vehicle and medium to tell any story you want, and you don't have to go to dark places, but I love challenging the audience. I love presenting concepts and ideas that are not taboo or offensive, but make you leave the cinema thinking a bit more. I want my films to linger, but also want them to nourish. And I use that word nourish a lot because I don't want to waste your time. You're giving up an hour and a half of your lives to sit and watch something indulgent that I've spent 8 years making with my team of artists. So I want you to leave the cinema having been entertained, but also nourished. I used to use this weird concept of I wanted every person in the audience to be sitting in a pile of compost, and my films were slowly nourishing them through the film, and then they leave feeling more enriched.
I think that what is objectionable is perfection and happiness. Those are obscene to me. The fact that cinema sells you into things that should be, things that are fair, things that end well. These are things that are basically spiritual pornography. And to me, the beauty of showing the ups and the downs and the tragedy, giving your movies are. I would like to tell your father, go in a time machine and tell him he is an actor. He is an actor, and you can see the progression. Today, the audience was treated to your short and this, but you follow from Mary and Max, which is, I think, an astounding film. Not only do you have constant obsessions, which repeat from film to film, but essentially, even a resource like finding out that you're loved after the fact, through a letter, or through a testimony that humbly says you are worth staying alive. This, without that poignancy, with making it a true happy ending, you wouldn't have that. And I think this requires from you a lot of fortitude, because it doesn't make the films easy to finance.
No, and I know with Mary and Max, it was a very challenging film to pitch because I said I didn't want Max to live at the end. They said, oh no, but you've got to tie up loose ends, and Mary would be more, it'd be tragic if Mary never meets Max. And I said, no, but that's real life. because a friend of mine, he was living in Scotland and his mother was dying of cancer, and they rang him and said, look, she's really deteriorated quickly. You're going to have to get back from Scotland to Australia very quickly, or she might pass away. So he got on a plane, came all the way back to Australia, got off, got a cab, and halfway from the airport to the home she died, and he missed her death. Now, if that was a Disney film, he would have made it to the, that's life. Life is imperfect, and I use that word a lot because, and that's why there's kintsugi bowls in their form. I love that Japanese art form because it's all about celebrating imperfections. The scars, the warts and all, and that's a theme that goes through all my films is we've got to learn to embrace our own imperfections but other people's, and I really get annoyed when people say your films are about disability, and I said no, they're not. No, I never use that word because I see every single one of us as having something about ourselves we wish we didn't have, a so-called imperfection, a flaw, and it's about embracing that and getting on with it and not trying to cure that, because this is just a part of who we are, and disability just is the wrong word and it's never sat well with me. And people say, oh, you're exploiting, some people say, oh, you're making pity porn. And that really annoys me too. I said, no, I'm making films about my friends and family. These are all real people that are in my lives. And I want to tell their stories. And I always say that I could make a film about every single one of you. If I spent enough time with you and got to know you, I could find out all sorts of interesting things about you. And I just, unfortunately, I've probably only got 2 films left and I'll be dead. But everybody has an interesting
that is another part of your commitment. The fact that each of these movies takes you 5 to 8 years to make, and the liberty to do them at that pace, with complete control, means that the average animated movie in Hollywood is over $100 million. And how much is this movie?
This costs 4. That's why I know the characters have legs.
But 4 buys you all of freedom.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you can then pursue what will tell the story properly and not what will attract. When people say, well, who is the audience? And I have to answer, me, right?
Yeah.
And whoever likes it.
Yeah, selfishly, I do make films for myself and my mother. And, I've always believed if you focus inwards and not worry about demographics and audiences and age brackets and all the rest, and just focus.
They still fuck it up.
Yeah. And I always get told, Adam, your films are not for children. Of course, don't bring, my films are rated R. But the irony is the films now get taught in schools all around the world as educational devices to teach about difference and acceptance. So, and that was never planned. Again, you just, particularly with comedy, I just want to make films that make me laugh, and you just cross your fingers and hope they're going to make others laugh too.
But one of the, from the first movie until now, for example, one of the most moving things is your news. The nudity. It's so beautiful. I think, and that's the attitude towards not keeping up with pace with being liked or accepted, or these are things that make you side with the characters, and they find salvation in books and on each other. That is so moving.
Well, I love nudity too, because I think
Imperfect nudity, right?
Yeah, asymmetrical breasts and again, I love. Actually, in the studio when we were making the film, we had 2 words that we would stick up on the walls: chunky, wonky. Chunky, wonky, and imperfect. And a lot of the prop makers have come from other studios where they're used to making things that are very refined and perfect. And they would make something and show it to me for approval, and I said, look, it's too good. Can you drop it on the ground a few times? Fix it up, because I wanted the aesthetic to be imperfect, but also it's celebrating the characters' imperfections and the nudity, which has gone through all my films. There's these motifs through every snails, nudity. It's again about, and you know, now that I've been making these films 28 years, I've begun to psychoanalyze myself. Whereas years ago it was very intuitive. And so recently, well, why are there so many nude characters in my films? What am I trying to say? And so, in a way, the films are free therapy, I think. You learn a lot about yourself as you get older making these films. And that's why I love motifs and repetition. And particularly in this film, the swirls of the snail. I just love that symbolism of life going full circle. So we crammed as many swirls in as we could. And I love symbolism, I love metaphors. Again, the films are very dense, and I have these, what I call my recipe books, my journals. And so when I'm starting a film, I'm going through all my journals looking for the ingredients. So for this film, I knew I wanted John Denver in there. I knew I wanted pigs mating. And so I found all my ingredients, and I'm not worried about the plot necessarily, and then hope that the three-act structure would eventually find itself there. And I do focus on the detail. It's almost a back-to-front way of writing. But I love idiosyncrasy as well. What makes each of us unique? And I'm always observing people at airports and on public transport, and always writing down things that I see and hear, and these become my ingredients.
When you say that, you say the ingredients, and what is beautiful is most of the narrative that is pushed is that a good life is a safe life. A good life is a life that ends well. A good life is one where things are fair or corrected to be fair. And what I love about your movies is lives have to be very eventful.
Yeah.
You have to screw your member, you have to dance to it, you have to burn a house, you have to, all this madness is what makes a life beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's why I love writing Pinky, because Pinky, she's an amalgamation of films like Harold and Maude, and I think Pinky's the person we all would like to become as we get older, where you don't care what people think anymore, you become a free spirit. And I love eccentricity too, and true eccentricity. I think true eccentrics don't even know they're eccentric. They're just. I think a lot of people put on this eccentricity, and they're not real eccentrics. So I love characters that have this freedom, and I think that's why Pinky resonates so well with people, because they identify with her. She reminds them of an auntie or an uncle, or parts of themselves. And Jackie Weaver was wonderful playing Pinky, because Jackie herself is like that.
There's two things that come out from what you are talking about. One of them is, I think that when the commercial movies write female characters, they either marginalize them or make them interesting only for one side of the audience, or they do the next cruelest thing, which is idealize them and make them heroes, whether they like it or not. And I think your movies, which are oftentimes two-handers, have incredibly messy and beautiful female characters.
Yeah, well, particularly the last two films, I've really enjoyed creating characters that are female, because my first, all my shorts are about men, and Harvey Crumpet's about a man, and I thought it's about time I really, started to tell stories about the women in my life. And there's a lot of my mother in this film. She's a reformed hoarder. And my mum's one of the funniest people I've ever met, but we don't want to tell her she's funny. She doesn't know she's funny. So, and so I'm always studying her and writing things down. Yeah, I think too, also to get characters that are very believable and authentic, you don't have to look far. You just, again, have to study the people around you. And the thing is, I'm trying to get you to believe these blobs of clay have a soul and a heartbeat, and for an hour and a half I'm getting you to suspend your disbelief and give over, and that's really hard to do, particularly in animation. You have to believe these characters are real, and so I use the word empathy a lot, and and I think that's what it comes down to. The story is important, the plot's important, but ultimately you really have to put yourself in my character's shoes. And what is it like to be an 8-year-old girl born with a cleft palate who's bullied at school? What's it like to be a 44-year-old autistic man living in New York who's never been able to hold down a job? And you know, normally we see these types of people in society and sort of, I don't know, look down on them or wish we hadn't seen them. And whereas I'm the opposite.
Or sanctify them in a strange way.
Yeah.
And you don't do that.
No, I want, they're on the same level as me. It's like, well, you know, what is unique about you? What makes you unique? Oh, okay, it's your autism. What is the, you know, Grace is based on a friend of mine who's born with a cleft palate, who as a child had 11 operations on her leg, and she was bullied and teased, yet she grew up to be an extrovert. Actually, she grew up to be an exhibitionist. She would be the first person to take all the clothes off at the party. And now she's the biggest extrovert, and she came to one of the screenings in London, and she was so grateful. I was worried actually. I thought, oh, what if she doesn't like the film? But she said, no, you told my story, and in the last couple of months I've been getting many messages and emails from people who have been born with cleft palates or people who've lost a twin. And so they're out there, and this is what I've been trying to tell investors and studios for the last 28 years. Oh, but there's not an audience for your films, Adam. I said, yes, there is. They're out there. I know they are, because I get letters and emails every day. And I think that's the frustrating thing too, is that
It never changed.
And it's a slow battle to sort of, you know, remind the investors that there is an audience.
Well, there is. I mean, if all art is self-portraiture, then once it's made, it's all mirror.
Yeah.
It's a mirror for some people to go, oh, that's me.
Yeah.
And they don't understand that, and they think that processing will do that. But there is a willingness in you, and I want to trace a line from the short to this film that is very interesting to me. You're a graphic artist. In fact, you painted T-shirts, right? And there is the first, the short, Harvey, has a curiously more polished surface, slightly straighter lines, and the animation is done more fluid in ones or rarely in twos, so the movements are more fluid, and little by little, you've been reclaiming the right for imperfection.
Yeah.
Like the lines get more crooked, more savage, less domesticated, and the animation goes into twos and threes and is a lot more expressive but less polished. Is this a journey you took consciously?
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes back to my grandfather, my mother, and myself. Have all inherited, it's called a physiological tremor. So my whole body shakes a little bit more than the average person. So as a child, my drawings were very wobbly, and I was very embarrassed about this. And so I'd hold my other hand and have, you know, it was, particularly as a child, it was like, oh, Adam can't draw a proper circle, and I still can't draw a proper circle. And so when I started making my shorts, I was very conscious of this, and Harvey Crumpet, I look back now, it's too refined, it's too slick. And I quickly realised that I wasn't a very good animator. I've never done a warp cycle, and I don't actually like animating. I didn't do it. I did one shot in this film. It's when Grace animates the snail. But I realised that here I am telling these stories about characters who have to embrace their imperfections, yet I'm not doing that myself. So that's why now I'm very, you know, I talk about my shakes. The characters are deliberately wonky to, again, to remind us all that, you know, you've got to embrace your imperfections. So something that was a lemon, I turned into lemonade, and you know, I think all of us have something, as I said earlier, that we wished we didn't have. And whereas now it's like, well, you know, it's going to get worse. I look at my mother, who I've been spending some time with in the last week, and she can't carry a cup of tea until it spills when she brings it over, and I think, oh, well, that's going to be me in a few years. But it doesn't matter, I've got animators too, I've got slaves. So that's where it all comes from, this physiological tremor.
Well, one thing that also has been a constant in your films from the short until now, you have an amazing cast. I mean, the first short, Jeffrey Rush. Second is Philip Seymour Hoffman. And talk a little bit about how hard, how easy, or how willful it was to cast these people.
Well, when I'm writing, I don't watch a lot of films with my eyes shut. So with this film, you know, in Australia we have a lot of famous female actors, Nicole Kidman, Kate Blanchett, Toni Collette, Margot Robbie, and they're all wonderful actors, but, you know, I would shut my eyes and listen to their voices, and they just didn't have Grace's, what it was. I couldn't even articulate what it is I wanted in Grace. And I do that with every film. I just have to watch as many films as I can until some authenticity comes along. Trouble is, they always tend to be very famous actors, and they're very expensive to get. But I know if I can get the screenplay to them and they can read the screenplay and realise this isn't for children, this is something that is challenging, adult, hopefully sophisticated, that they'll say yes. And that's what happened with Philip Seymour Hoffman. We had very little money to pay him, but he identified with Max, you know, and in hindsight, he was actually going through a lot of turmoil himself in his personal life. And Jeffrey Rush identified with Harvey, and the reason I chose Sarah Snook for this film was she had this quietness about her voice. She had this, she's very, she has no ego. She's very self-deprecating. She's got this wonderful shyness. And I could hear all that in her voice, and I thought, yes, she's our Grace. I have to get. And then Jackie Weaver just had to be Pinky because she just had that eccentricity. So it is tricky, but you know, sometimes you get.
Dominique Pignon.
Oh, Dominique Pignon. Well, I'm friends with Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who, of course, you know, is a real simpatico with his films of mine and yours too. There's something that there's something intrinsic I love about your films, and it's very hard to articulate. But when weird, I think when I saw, you know, I think I saw Delicatessen before Pan's Labyrinth, and there's something. Oh, these are my family. There's a kinship here, and I was lucky to meet Jean-Pierre many years ago, and he and I have communicated for many years from France to Australia. And so in this film, I wanted Jean-Pierre to play Percy, and I contacted him and said, no, I don't want to do that. He said, what about my friend Dominique Pignon? I said, oh, are you kidding? Fantastic. So yeah, it's a very eclectic cast. Nick Cave's in there as well.
And Eric Bana.
And Eric, yeah. And a lot of these people live in Melbourne where my producer Liz is here. I should get her to stand up. These actors, but again, I don't want to get these actors for their celebrity or their how shiny it is. There has to be that something about their voice, and that's tricky.
Well, and the other thing that I think, and the reason why I support through scholarships or workshops or this and that stop motion is because I sustain, and you are proof of it, that is one of those art forms in animation that can be done by 1, 2, 3 people over a lengthy period of time. It is incredibly useful to create almost tonal poems or declaratory biographical things. And I think that in my opinion, you over the years you have become an incredible figure in animation, and I would say stop motion loosely because your technique is different, but because of your willfulness for this, have you noticed that as you transit from the short to this film now is over a decade and a half almost, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time, and when I first started out, I felt very lonely, and I often wondered why isn't anyone else doing what I'm doing, because it's so much fun, it's so fulfilling, enjoyable, and it's all the things I love. I love making things with my hands. I love drawing. I draw every day if I can. It's my yoga. I love cinematography. I love cinema. I love lighting, and I love music and working with orchestras and all those things. So it's an amalgamation of all these delights and indulgences. But I always felt very lonely and I had a lot of self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, and I still go through moments of that. Even coming to America, even the fact that you're all here on a Thursday night, because you always feel the odd one out in the film industry. You know, I feel like I'm the strange person in the corner, particularly in Australia, where the industry is so small. And we're talking about Mexico too. It's not like Aardman in Bristol and Leica in Canada and all these big stop motion studios. We don't have those in Australia. So, I mean, I'm very lucky because in Australia the government give me money. My films are all financed by the Australian taxpayer. So we're very lucky to have an Australian government that supports the arts. But it is always competitive, it's shrinking. You know, we're about to probably go into a very right-wing government in Australia, and so the arts are going to suffer undoubtedly. So it's always a battle. But I think now at the age of 53, I don't feel as lonely, particularly this film. If this film didn't work, then my career probably would be over because the government wouldn't give me any more money, you know. So it's film to film, you know, that expression, you're only as good as your last film. And for me as an independent animation auteur, it really does ring true.
And there is, I think art can offer ideals which are very dangerous. You're talking about kintsugi, and that's part of the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, or the beauty of imperfection. And the other thing art can offer, which I think is more constructive, is absolution. You know, to absolve you for what life is and this and that. And I think that one of the things that you do that is remarkable is, especially in a time where the lines are being blurred so violently between what an image is spiritually and symbolically, and the tools that are supposedly doing a lot to democratize it, or whatever the term they want to use to sell us fucking AI. Which is a lot. I mean, it's not what they want. They want money. But at the end of the day, you have made an incredible effort to keep everything handmade.
Yes, well, you know, I often say to audiences after the screening that what you just saw, every prop, every set, every character was handmade. And in this film, we made it very clear, and actually all my films, we don't do any CGI at all. So, and that's why I put at the end of the film, this film was made by human
No
beings.
CGI is for harm.
Yeah. And look, we certainly do big removals, we use digital tools, of course we use digital tools. We edit the film digitally, we use LED lights now, we use digital cameras. There's all these wonderful digital tools, and they've liberated stop motion. We can now see what we're animating in high res. And when I left film school in '96, I was told I was pursuing a dying art form and that stop motion would be killed and smothered by CGI. Well, it's alive and well. You know, Guillermo made Pinocchio and Wes Anderson's making So, and I think now with AI that's arrived, and it's not, sadly, not going away, it's here to stay. You know, they keep saying, oh, it's a tool, you know, AI is a tool, and I said, it's made by tools. You know, there's a lot of lying going on with AI, and my brother works in Silicon Valley, and I know that these lies are there because, you know, when I go to these screenings and tell people that the film is handmade, it's like basket weaving. I think I talked about this at dinner, is that baskets can be made by hand and baskets can be made by a machine, but the handmade basket's always going to be more appreciated. You might have to pay more, but it's the same reason in COVID everyone started making bread and taking up knitting. The handcrafts and art stores really boomed during COVID, and that's always going to be there. We're always going to appreciate things that are handmade. But as you say, there's a lot of people out there now with AI who just want to make money, and it really upsets me too that the big tech companies are trawling the internet and stealing all our content.
Well, I really think I mean, for me AI is like spiritual side of art can only be the gift of pain from a human to a human. Right? And that's what you give.
Yeah.
What you give us is your pain. And what you give us, however the measure of it may be, is your wisdom. And wisdom is never a big revelation. It's a small revelation, isn't it? And it's the distillation of that wisdom, which is essentially the same wisdom from the short until this, but the way you can put it with each progression is more succinct and more beautiful.
Well, it's like the quote, life can only be understood backwards, but we have to look forwards, which of course is Søren Kierkegaard, the philosopher, and it's always been my favourite quote. It's what I'd love to have in my tombstone. It's a very simple quote. It's a very, when you think about it, well, it's, of course, it's almost trite, but actually it's quite profound when you think about it. And I was very worried when I put that in, because I thought, well, I did use that in an earlier film, and I'm repeating myself, but my gut is,
Everybody does.
well, I think it's such a truism, and I love that word, I can never pronounce it, verisimilitude, where you have moments of truth. And I love that film Tokyo Story at the end where he's on the swing and there's that beautiful moment where you think, oh, that is so real and authentic. And that's again what I'm trying to do with each film, is have those moments of truth and break through all the clutter. Because again, you're giving up an hour and a half of your life, and so I don't want to get preachy and I don't want to get too philosophical, but I certainly want you to leave thinking, and so I try and instill as much poetry and thought-provoking material as possible. And quite often I don't know what the film's about until I've finished it, and they go, oh yes, it is about cages. I mean, in the film it's the theme of cages, self-imposed cages, the cages we impose on others. And I thought that would be the main thing, but as it turns out, it's actually the life can only be understood backwards when you move forwards. And then I discovered snails can't reverse either. And they can go around in circles, but they can't go backwards. And I thought, oh, actually, that's a perfect connection, because originally it was Memoir of a Ladybird, and then that film Ladybird came out. But it was also, the first draft was getting a bit cutesy and saccharine, and I thought, no, there must be a better creature or animal out there that is much more metaphorical for what
And you're having it in the earlier film, you have this name.
Yeah, it was there all the time, and I just forgot about it. And so yeah, and also snails are introverts. You touch their antennas, and they're always.
So are animators.
Yeah, that's the thing where my animators just love being alone in the dark by themselves. And we have a lot of people who work for us who are on the spectrum, and for them it's a wonderful environment because they get to focus on something for 10 hours. So yeah, it's snails.
Of all the crafts of cinema, the one that has to create absolutely everything is animation. And you cannot get to that purity without observation that has to necessarily come from slightly, on place. You cannot observe like a regular person, which observes for a second and a half and there is glued up again. You have to be able to concentrate like that. Was this clear to you when you were a child? Or when did you stumble upon this talent, courage, whatever it is?
Well, I think, I'm from a family of 4. My brother was an extrovert, became an actor, of course. And my sister and my younger brother, so I was sort of in the middle, the forgotten child. There's not many photos of me in the photo albums. And whenever there was an argument in the house, I would go and hide under the couch and find my little safe place, or be in my bedroom drawing. So being creative was a sanctuary, and I always remember my parents would give me for Christmas a set of Derwent coloured pencils, and that was the happiest day of my life, because for a whole year I had all these coloured pencils and I could just spend as much time as I liked just going into the zone, that zone that artists talk about. And even today I still, I brought my pencil and paper with me on this trip, and I spent Christmas with my nephew who's got a brain tumour. He's having his third brain tumour, and we spent the week drawing. And to me, that was such a fantastic holiday because I got to just spend time with this little kid, and we both just sat there quietly drawing aliens and monsters. And so sometimes I feel weird getting paid to make these films because I'm getting paid to do something I love. Yes, it's exhausting and stressful, and there's a lot of pressure from the investors. And Nick Park once said this: it's like being creative with a gun at your head. And I really feel that sometimes, but I'm very lucky. I get to, as you say, tell whatever story I want, and it's that creative freedom that keeps coming back to that.
And eventually, the culture you create around animation becomes your family.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You end up spending more time with these people than you do your real family. And Liz, my producer's, we've become a very close friend, and all the animators are like my children, and and I'm desperately hoping they'll all get jobs elsewhere. And that's why I want to keep making films in Australia too. Of course, Hollywood's where it's all happening, but I've got these
Or not happening.
or not happening. And
I call it the land of the slow no.
Right.
It's a short of time and effort to get out.
Well, that's the thing, and so many films now are getting made in other countries. Australia makes a lot of Hollywood films now, so we want to stay in Australia and just bring money from America to Australia. That's the plan.
Now, to finish, I would like to say that as you grow older, you value an artist as much for what they do, for what they don't do. And I want to thank you for everything you do and for everything you stubbornly don't do. So thank you. And if I may, we would like to share a moment because we have a cake for him. So.